So the goal here is to provide a syntax that if you arrange your tables along the lines of that previous example, then it gives you a very sort of elegant Rubyistic notation for managing those associations. And in fact, for the most part, once you've set it up so that the tables have the correct keys, you don't really have to worry too much about it after that. It kind of just works. So here's how it goes. Within your class that derives from active record base, so we're going to go for the example that we did before where we could say that a movie has many reviews. Here's what you say. Movie has many reviews. Isn't that the most beautiful syntax ever? That's it. You're done. Well, you're not really done, because this assumes that, in fact, you have a reviews table, and that in that reviews table, there is a foreign key called movie ID. So this mechanism is set up so that if you've set up your tables correctly along the lines of the question we just did, then you get some really nice syntax for talking about movies having many reviews. And by the way, in the other class, the review class, I can also say the review belongs to a movie. And this doesn't change the tables in any way. It's the exact same setup, but I'll show you why both sides of this are useful. And by the way, if you have trouble remembering, like, where does the foreign key go? This is the mnemonic that I use. That when I'm declaring relationships, if a movie has many reviews, which one gets has many, which one gets belongs to, the foreign key belongs to me. So if I say that review belongs to a movie, because that's how a movie can have many of them, a review belongs to a movie, then the review table is the one that's going to have the foreign key back to the movies table, not the other way around. So this is just like my little way of remembering this. Maybe it will help you. OK, so what does this look like? So as we've seen, the review table gets a foreign key that has the primary key of the movie that that review is for. That allows a movie to have many reviews. So now, if movie is an instance of an active record movie, I can actually say movie.reviews. And I will get back an innumerable collection of all of the review objects that are reviews for that movie, because Rails will have done this join internally, right? It's going to look at the movies table, to look at the reviews table and pull out all records where the movie ID value matches the ID of movie, the receiver of that method, right? I say that it does it lazily, which just means that the join and the query are not actually done until you try to retrieve something from the collection. But that's a nicety. Not only that, if I have a review, I can say review.movie to ask the question, what is the single movie that this review is about? Right? Because remember that a movie has many reviews, but a review belongs to exactly one movie. Hence, singular versus plural in the method calls. Right? They sort of reflect what you expect. One of them is you're talking about a collection of owned objects. The other one is you're talking about a single owning object. Okay? And this does the reverse thing. If I have a review, then basically, if I look at the movie ID field associated with that review, I can now go back to the movie table and ask which movie is it associated with. So I can actually go in both directions. Right? Syntactically, has many gives me this one, and belongs to give me this one. It doesn't change what's in the tables, but it basically gives Rails a cue that if I say review.movie, I am saying that the review has a foreign key to the movies table, and if I look up the movie whose key matches that FK value, that will be the movie that that review is about. Now, you do have to add the fields yourself. And we've already seen how to use database migrations to change the schema, to like add and remove columns from the tables. So the one thing that isn't sort of purely automatic is you have to make the tables look right. You have to know which table has to have a foreign key in it, and you've got to have a migration that sticks that foreign key in there. And here's what that migration would look like. So if we were creating the reviews table, and this is the migration syntax that you've already seen, the reviews table is going to have an integer field, which is the number of potatoes. And here, I'm going to actually give you a preview of a more complex example. I'm going to put two foreign keys. I'm going to say, I want a foreign key that references the movie table, and I want a foreign key that references the moviegoers table, which we haven't created yet, but we're going to use it in a future example. So if I ran this migration, this is kind of the schema that I would end up with. I have three tables. As always, every table has a field for the primary key, the ID. That's That's a typo. I will fix that. There should not be a, let me fix that right now. That's just super confusing. Hold on. OK, sorry about that. So if I actually run this migration, here's what I get. 3 tables, each with a primary key, which is ID, as always. But the reviews table also has 2 foreign keys. One of them refers back to a movie. One of them refers to a moviegoer. So I'm actually taking our example one step farther and saying that a review not only is associated with a specific movie, it is also associated with the specific moviegoer who wrote it. Okay? And I'm going to use that as the basis of a future example. But this is to show essentially what the migration looks like, right? This is the part you have to do manually. You have to say which foreign keys you want in the table. And when you say references, what you will get is a field whose name is whatever it references underscore ID. Right? That's just Rails convention for how foreign keys are named, which you should follow. OK, so questions about the migration? It's just like any other migration you've seen, only instead of specifying data fields, we're now also able to specify foreign key fields. Right? So it's important to understand that the structure of the table working together with has many and belongs to is another one of these leaky abstractions. Right? Has many and belongs to, if you haven't defined the appropriate foreign keys, Rails doesn't really have any way of knowing it until it tries to do the database query and it says, for example, hey, wait a minute, you're asking for movie.reviews, but the reviews table doesn't have a movie ID field in it. Right? What's the deal? So you still have to understand how the abstraction works in order to use it. But if you don't abuse it, it provides you some pretty nice functionality. Now you can say things like this. Right? If you have a movie and you ask for movie.reviews, you'll get an enumerable collection, each element of which is a review object, an active record review object. They will have been pulled from the database for you. You can also go the other way. If you have a review object, you can ask review.movie, and you will get an instance of the active record movie object, which will have been pulled out of the database for you. You can add new reviews. So I can start out with a movie, and on the collection of reviews, I can either build, which doesn't yet save it, or I can create, which saves it in place, a new review for that movie. How nice is that? One question is, what is different between just calling movie.new or movie.create? What is different about the way that this review object is going to be built if I say movie.reviews.build, movie.reviews.create, as opposed to if I just said movie.create without the intervening reviews? What does this allow to happen? The create saves it as well. So it's true that the difference between these 2 lines is this will just sort of create it in memory without saving it in the database. This will also save it in the database. But let's say just comparing movie.reviews.create with movie.create. What would be the difference between those 2 calls? Sir?
So like movie.reviews.create, it probably creates like a review object rather than a movie object because you need to make a new review and then add that.
You're right, and I misspoke. You're right, and what I should have said was, we can edit this out in post. What I should have said was, how is movie.reviews.create different from review.create? That's what I should have said. Sorry about the confusion, ladies and gentlemen. How is movie.reviews.create, which is going to create a review, totally true, but how is that different from just saying review.create? What crucial piece of information is going to be included here that would not necessarily be included automatically with just plain old review.create? Sir?
Does it automatically add a foreign key entry for the movie?
That's exactly the right answer. So the answer is, when you say movie.reviews.create, yeah, it's going to create a review, but the new review that's being created knows what movie it belongs to. In other words, the foreign key value for movie underscore ID will automatically be filled in when the sort of template of this object is materialized for you by active record. If you just said review.create, by default, the movie ID wouldn't have any value. Now, you may ask, can you actually say can you say review.create and explicitly specify the movie ID value? Yes, you can do that. But why do it when this is actually more legible and has the same effect of doing it for you? The other subtle reason to do this is, as I mentioned, you can actually override whether the foreign key is called movie ID or something else. I do not advise it, but you can. And movie.reviews.create will do the right thing no matter how you named the foreign key. Whereas review.create, now you're basically taking it upon yourself to know how you named the foreign key. But the real reason is this is just more legible. It basically says, I have a movie, it has some reviews, I'm going to add another one. And the critical piece of information being filled in here is the foreign key of that review is going to be correct the moment the review springs into existence. And by the way, movie.reviews is not only an enumerable collection in its own right, it is also an active record relation, which means you can do most things on movie.reviews that you could do just on an individual review. For example, within the reviews, I can say only the reviews for this movie that have a 5 potato rating. So I can essentially attach additional conditions onto the end of this, as this is basically acts like an active record relation. Right? So it's not just a collection that you get back. You can actually do a lot of the other things on it that you could do on just plain a review or just plain movie. So good times. Yes?
Can you do like a multiple relational table? So let's say like you had, I guess you kind of brought it up, but two tables that have nothing in relation to each other, but you have an intermediary table that have a relation to both. Can you form kind of like a relation? Yeah.
Yes. So the question, I'll paraphrase the question. When you have, like in the previous picture that I showed, where there's a table that has pointers to two other tables, but those two outer tables have no relationship to each other, can you essentially navigate through the middle table? And the answer is yes, and that will probably be the first thing we talk about Thursday, because I don't think we'll have time today. But it is called a through association, and it's exactly what you said. And it allows you to ask questions like, who wrote all the reviews for these movies? And you jump through two tables to get to it. So we'll talk about that on Thursday, but good preview, thank you. Okay, so kind of where are we in terms of associations? So to add a one-to-many association, right? So what's one-to-many? That's like movie has many reviews. There's one owning object, and there is a variety of owned objects. So in the owning model, so in our case, the movie model, you put has many whatevers into the active record model file, into the definition. And in the owned model, which in our case was the review, you could say belongs to. Then you have a migration to make sure that the foreign keys that are needed to model the relationship actually become part of those tables. You apply the migration, rake db migrate, as you've done before. And then finally, you just make sure that the changed schema of the database gets reflected to your test database. But in fact, if you forget to do this, Rails will tell you, so not a big deal. Okay? But basically, that's all you do. You decide what you want the relationship to be. You add has many and belongs to in the correct places. And then you create a migration to make sure that the required foreign keys actually exist in those tables. Right? And this is the part between steps 1 and 2. This is where it is on you to make sure that they're consistent. If you say movie has many reviews, you're basically making a promise that the reviews table has a movie ID foreign key. And when you write your migration, you had better keep that promise, or things will fail in confusing ways at runtime. Right? Has many and belongs to are not magic. They're just a shorthand that assumes you've set up the tables correctly and then does those queries for you and does all the foreign key matching.